Gordon.
Okay, you're running.
All right. So my name is Brandon Francois. Today we'll be talking about manipulating CSS class properties using JavaScript. As I researched this, I discovered that there were many different ways to do very similar things. So hopefully I cover some of those major points. So one of the first topics I want to go over is just updating or adding CSS properties to an element. This can be accomplished using HTML DOM to select specific elements that you'd like to update. I have some examples here. In this first example here, we can click the Update Style button. It'll update the style of this div here. Which, if you click that, we'll see that. To accomplish that, we'll look at the JavaScript here. So the name of that, or the ID of that div element is alpha. So I call that here, and then I use the style to pick specifically the style, and then the property I change with this one is width, which I set to 800, which it was originally 600. I changed the border, increased the width, changed the style of that to dotted and the color, and then changed the background here. One thing I wanted to call out here is when selecting certain properties that have hyphens in them. Normally in the external style sheet, this property would be written as background-color. When using it here, you use camel case instead, remove the hyphen, and capitalize the second word. And back here, if we were to click on the revert style, it'll return back to the normal style. To accomplish that, I use the remove attribute and remove the style attribute. So the way that you're changing the style using this method is it's as if you're adding an inline style to that element there rather than updating the actual style sheet like an external style sheet. So it adds that style attribute there, and which overwrites or takes priority over any external style sheet that you have. So to set it back to how it was before, use the remove attribute method, and you define which attribute you'd like to remove there. So that is one way to adjust the CSS properties for an element, is just using DOM to call out the style and then which property. Another method that I used to update the style was simply updating the class for an element. In this first example here, I used get elements by class name, which will search your document for every element that has that class in it, and it returns a node list. One problem I ran into in creating this example is I tried just to loop through the node list, just starting at index 0 and incrementing from there. That did not work. I learned that a node list is live, I use air quotes, in that as you update one element, if it no longer belongs in that list or whatever you use to compile that list, it'll be removed and the next property up will jump down. So when I updated the property at index 0, it removed, and then the one was at index 1 moved to 0. So I was missing some of the classes. They weren't getting updated. So how I resolve that, you'll see here in this function, is I just counted backwards. So I found the index of the last element in the list and then counted backwards, which resolved that issue for me. So if I were to click this button, this will update all of these boxes which have the class code X, the code example. So I click that here. It updates the width, the border, the background, various things. I'll look at that here. So it changes from this class name to this class name, which I have defined in my style sheet. If I click the revert class, it'll do similar thing, revert all class, it'll loop back through and update it back to the original class name. So that's one way you can dynamically change your page, is updating the class of your various elements. And I should show, in order to update the class, you use class name. So here is where I get my node list here with all the elements that have the class name, and then I take each element, get its class name, and update it there. So using class name, you can update those elements. Another similar way I found to get either all the elements with a specific class name, or even just all the types of elements, the different CSS selectors, is using the query selector or query selector all method. With these methods, you can, well, with the query selector, you can return a single element, the first element in the document that matches your criteria, or with query selector all, it'll again return a node list with all of the elements that match your criteria. So to use those, the arguments that it takes is any CSS selector input as a string, so you have your quotes around it. You can also input many different selectors to find elements that match multiple factors. So you separate those with commas. So it's more versatile than just getting elements by class name, as you can do many different CSS selectors to find those. Another example I have here is using the get elements by class name, is to be able to toggle different parts of the page, be able to hide them, changing the display property. I have these buttons up here to hide these different areas. So if I want to hide the examples, I can click that and it'll set the display property to none, as you see here. So this will get, so I have the different sections, I have the different classes in there. For the details being details, and then for the examples, it'll either be code examples or new code examples for that. So I can toggle all of it to collapse everything. So this is good if say you have a page with a lot of information, maybe a few different topics, and you want the user to be able to see only specific material. You can update the CSS to be able to display only those specific topics there. So next, another way you can manipulate the CSS is by changing the style sheet that your page uses. The way I accomplished that, I actually tried two different ways. I wanted to show you the way that I failed, but I think may be able to get it to work. I probably need to do a little more research. I tried getting all the sheets, or all the style sheets, this method using the style sheets object, which will return a list of, or it will return all of the style sheets associated on your page. And I tried to loop through those. I assigned titles to each style sheet, and I passed a specific theme that I wanted. That way I didn't quite get working, but I'm going to work on that to see if I can get that going. The other method I used here was just by setting the attribute in the style sheet of disabled, setting that property. We'll see here. So here's my style sheets that I have here. So I have 3 in there. This is my default style sheet, and I have 2 others here, which I currently have set to disabled. So when you click a button, it'll go through those style sheets. It will enable the one that you pick through the button, and it'll disable all the other ones. So if I were to click this, it would change to this dark.css style sheet, change the page, how it looks. With this one, I changed the layout a little bit, as well as the color and all that. If I were to click this other one, you get different properties in there. So you can create completely different style sheets and be able to allow your user to cycle through those with these buttons or however you'd like to do that. And we can get back to just the default theme there. So as you see, there's a lot of different ways to manipulate the CSS using JavaScript. This is only a handful of methods. As I was researching, like I said, there's many different ways that you can do that. So hopefully this covers enough of those. Do you have any questions or any comments?
I do.
Okay.
Going to your update class, can you go to your JavaScript?
Sure.
So I was actually initially confused, but I was thinking about this, and I think I understand it now. My initial question was, okay, why did you actually have to loop back through, I guess, backwards? But just to see if I'm correct on this, because like you said, it's more of a live node list, it's going to remove one every single time you update it. So when you go to the length -1, so if you have 5 lists total, your last index number is going to be 4. You then change its class, and then once it loops through back again, you're going to have 4. Your last index will be numbered as a 3 because it removed the last one, and so on until you get back to 0. Right?
Yeah. So what I was doing initially, looping forward from 0, and incrementing up. So it would start at 0. It would update that first one at index 0. It'd remove it from the list, and then the next class at index 1 would move to index 0. So it'd increment to 1, but the next one is index 0, so that one would never get updated.
Gotcha.
So that was my problem. It was missing.
It would continually miss stuff if you kept that running. Okay.
Yeah, so looping
I understand.
from the end backwards, it's able to hit all of those. So
perfect. Cool.
That was a little bit of a headache there.
That clears it up for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking on that. I'm like, wait, why would you want to do backwards? Like what? But I totally understand it now. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other questions or comments?
I think I'm good.
I feel
all right.
Like you're the one in the lead with all your assignments.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
It was
I know, seeing this, I'm like, oh, crap.
Oh, man.
No, I thought it was great.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, and you can stop recording if you haven't yet.